Hello from the hilltop. Welcome to today's Georgetown University Alumni Career Services webinar, sponsored by the Georgetown University Alumni Association. I'm Sarah Adler, Associate Director of Alumni Career Services. Today's webinar, Overcoming Imposter Syndrome, is hosted by Hoya friend and career coach Hallie Crawford. Today's webinar had more than 200 registrants, and we're so thrilled to see so many of you on the line. Thanks for taking the time to be with us today. Before we get started, I'd like to share a few webinar tips and reminders. First, this webinar is being recorded and it will be made available to all registrants on our Alumni Career Services YouTube channel within 24 hours of today's broadcast. You will receive the link to the webinar recording in a webinar follow-up email, which will also contain a post-webinar survey for you to take, information on upcoming webinars, and more ways to stay connected with Georgetown Alumni Career Services. Questions and comments are welcome throughout today's webinar, and we look forward to hearing from you. To submit a question, please use the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel. Hallie will take questions at the end of her webinar today. Additionally, we'll be using the polling feature of GoToWebinar, so when you see those poll questions go out, please do take a few seconds to respond to the polls. We appreciate your responses in advance. Finally, if you're having any technical difficulties, please submit those concerns to me via the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel as well. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Hallie. Hallie Crawford is a certified career coach and national career expert based in Atlanta, Georgia. Her company, HallieCrawford.com, and team of coaches have helped thousands of people worldwide identify and transition into their dream careers, effectively navigate their job searches, and enhance their performance at work. Hallie is regularly featured as a career expert in the media, including on US News, Forbes.com, The Wall Street Journal, CNN, and Fox Business News. Hallie, we're thrilled to have you with us today and eager to hear from you, so I'm going to turn things over to you now.
Perfect, Sarah. Thank you so much. That was great. And thank you, everyone, for being here today. We really appreciate your time, especially on your lunch hour, give or take, depending on your time zone. We greatly appreciate your time and participation. So I'm Hallie Crawford. As Sarah said, I'm a certified career coach and the founder of my own company, HallieCrawford.com. And I actually have been coaching and training for over 18 years. I know some of you are probably thinking, how is that possible? Because she sounds like she's 12. I'm actually 45, just got lucky, don't have too many gray hairs there. And I absolutely love what I do. I'm passionate about it. I have a team of coaches and resume writers that work with us as well. And I have an undergraduate degree from Vanderbilt University and a graduate degree from the University of Illinois. Thrilled to be here with you today. So the first thing I wanted to kind of share with you all is to let you know that I understand what it's like to have the imposter syndrome because I feel this way myself. Even after having been successful for so long with my own company and serving so many clients, and we get rave reviews on our services, I still sometimes feel this way. If you take a look at this slide here, it's just kind of funny. I have to share this. It's me on the left, my mom in the middle, my sister on the right. My sister is actually a Georgetown alum, so I have a special affinity for the school. But my mom in the middle here, she actually lives in Atlanta and spends a lot of time with my 10-year-old son, which is great. And you know, just about a year ago, I was picking him up from her house, and she gave me this great advice. I was having a hard time with something, I think it was personally, and she gave me this great advice, and I said, that's fantastic. Like, where did you hear that? And she said to me with a deadpan face, I read it on your blog. And I say this to you all because I was surprised at the time, like, really? Because sometimes I still experience, like I said, this sense of imposter syndrome, like I feel younger than I am, and sometimes don't give myself enough credit for the things that I've accomplished. So I want you to know I understand this kind of phenomena, if you will, and I understand what it takes to help you overcome it. We have this great website, we have this great business, but one of the things I want you all to consider and think about, you know, just at the beginning here, and then in the next slide, I'm going to show you our agenda, but start to think about, are these like voices in your head that tell you, gosh, you're not as great a business owner as you look? That's one of the things that I think about or hear in my head all the time. Is it a fear that you have to like step out of your comfort zone? a voice in your head, a fear, an emotion, or is it simply that you just don't take action about things that you need to take a risk on in your career or otherwise? So the first thing, kind of right out of the box here, is I want you to know that I understand how this is, and that even people who are successful and have been successful for years, they can feel this way as well. So you're not alone. That's the bottom line. Okay. So here's what we're going to talk about today is we're going to discuss how to define the imposter syndrome and what does it mean. We're going to discuss the impact of it, the internal impact, if you will, as well as the external impact. And I say that because, the internal impact I was kind of referencing a moment ago about the internal piece is those fears or negative thoughts that we might have. And the external impact obviously will be, what do I not do or what actions do I not take as a result of having this imposter syndrome? We're going to talk about tools to manage around it and action steps as well. Okay. And as Sarah said, just everyone, you're going to get a recording of this presentation, as she mentioned, which is great. If you would also like a copy of the presentation, I would be happy to provide that to you. Just feel free to email me at admin@halliecrawford.com, and I'll email you a PDF and any of the other tools that we're going to be talking about today. Okay? All right, so let's talk about how to define the imposter syndrome first, okay? It's basically a psychological phenomenon in which people, they're unable for whatever reason or have a hard time or just don't do it. They don't internalize and really stand up for what their accomplishments are. They feel like they're frauds in some way, shape, or form. I think that word is a little bit strong, but in some cases for people, they can feel like they're not really as good as other people think they are. And for whatever reason, they also feel like they don't deserve the success that they've achieved. And they assume that it's either luck or, I got a lucky break, or I had a really nice boss who, liked me and, gave me a chance when I didn't deserve it. Versus, knowing and understanding that, gosh, it's because I'm so talented or intelligent or whatever it is, or I'm persistent and I'm motivated. So it's where we basically don't internalize our achievements and we assume it's something outside of us, not something related to what we have done. That's kind of a basic, general definition of the imposter syndrome. And one of the things I want you all to know too, that it's normal for you to feel this way sometimes, but not others. I feel this way sometimes, and then other times the complete opposite. So don't feel like you're alone in that either, that you can feel kind of both ways. And it could be, by the way, situational. It could be, when you talk to a certain client or when you're giving a presentation. So I do want you all to think about, and go ahead and get out your pen and paper here or write on your computer, start to think about and write down, when are the times when I feel this way more than others? Because it's really helpful to become more aware of those times, because then you can manage around them much more effectively because you know that it's coming, okay? So in terms of defining it still, let's talk about this just for a couple more minutes here, because I want you all to take a look at, this is a quote from Inc. magazine a few years ago. And this man, Bud Stockwell, I believe this health food store is out on the West Coast. But this was a quote from him, very successful man. And he said, literally, I didn't feel like I deserved the success of my organization. We have a great business, but how much of it really was because of me and how much is because of just the location, like the luck or the staff. Now, obviously, there's nothing wrong with, and it's very good to give kudos and credit to your team and your employees and everything else. But this person, very successful, again, was standing there saying, I'm not sure how much of it was me. So this is a normal response to success, okay? And there are some statistics on this slide. Approximately 2 out of every 5 successful people consider themselves frauds in some way, shape, or form. And 70% of all people or professionals out there feel like imposters at one time or the other. So again, you're not alone. And we do want to start to think about, when are these times that it happens more frequently for me? Is it when you're alone by yourself working? That tends to happen for me more often. Is I have a more difficult time sometimes with the imposter syndrome when I'm, because I work at home, I have a home office by myself, and my team is all virtual. And sometimes those negative voices can kind of get the best of me during that time, okay? So If you feel like this is you, just FYI, and you'd like to talk about anything that we discussed here today further because you feel like your situation is really unique and you need some extra assistance, just wanted to let you know, happy to chat with you in a free career strategy session. Just let me know, okay? All right, so let's talk about, and we'll get to this first poll here in just a second. There are three kind of categories, if you will. Let's talk about the impact next. So this is the second item on our agenda. And we want to talk about the impact next. What happens as a result of having this, okay? So some of the options, if you will, or possibilities for the internal impact is that we might feel like a fake or a fraud. We might attribute our success to luck or something else external, like I said, and we'll discount our success and even downplay it. And here's the deal, everyone. Awareness about what's going on for you and what these voices are saying or what the emotions are, it's a huge first step, okay? So I want you all to think about right now, based on this slide, which of these do you fall into? And we're going to open up the poll. Sarah, if you want to go ahead and get that started, that'd be great. Which of these on this list here, on this slide, apply to you the most? Because becoming aware of what's going on first will then allow you to be more objective and kind of observe what's going on rather than being the victim of it.
So yeah, so the poll's open. Thanks so much to those of you who have taken a few seconds to submit. I'm going to leave the poll open just for a little longer.
Good, perfect. So we've got a great number of people today too, so that's perfect.
Yeah. Alrighty, just a couple more seconds here. All right, let's take a look at our results. So it looks like 41% of you said feeling like a fake, 17% said attributing success to luck, and 42% said discounting success.
Got it. Okay, so mostly the discounting success and feeling like a fake.
Yep.
Okay, good. Sarah, thank you for that. And thank you everyone for participating. So part of why we do this today is to, again, let you know that you're not alone. This is normal, okay? But also, like I said, I want you to identify and keep this kind of top of mind in the next few weeks so that you can start to notice the patterns of when you feel like a fake or when you're naturally kind of discounting your success, so that you again understand, gosh, does it have to do with a certain person or a certain situation that I'm in? Because the deal is, and I just want to reiterate this, and then I've got a quick client story as well I want to share, but the deal is the sooner you can start to observe what's going on for you in terms of the imposter syndrome, the sooner you'll be able to manage it, because we've got to get outside of it and become more objective about it rather than being kind of sucked into it and being its victim. So the sooner you can do that, you can watch it and say, oh, okay, that's what Hallie was talking about the other day on the webinar. That's that thing that's the imposter syndrome. What do I need to do to work around it? And I'll give you the tools in just a little bit to start to work around it. While you're thinking about this, quick story here. I had a client, Beth, a few years ago, and she actually didn't have a college degree. She was a marketing director at Home Depot here in Atlanta, and she succumbed to, or fell into all of these categories. She felt all of these things in terms of the imposter syndrome. She felt like she wasn't as talented as others thought she was, especially since she didn't have a college degree. She felt like she got lucky and got some lucky breaks along the way. She literally would say to me, oh, well, my bosses really liked me and have always promoted me, versus, hey, I'm good at what I do. And as a result, she discounted her success all the time and didn't truly value what she brought to the table, and felt as a result that she couldn't move on, although in the role that she was in, she was pretty unhappy. And that's a big part of why she came to coaching. And I'll tell you the end of the story a little bit later. It's actually very good news, okay? So let's talk about how often next you feel like an imposter. So we also kind of want to know the frequency of this. So we want to hear about your experience, okay? So think about that right now. How often do you feel this way? And Sarah, if you want to get the poll going, that would be great. How often you feel this way? Is it more often than not? Because if that's the case, that's a really big problem, right? And again, you want to think about the frequency, but also kind of the time frame that this might happen. So Sarah, let me know about the poll results. We'll give them a minute.
Yep, I'm just going to give you guys a little more time. Poll is open. Just a couple more seconds. Thanks for taking the time to submit your responses. We really appreciate hearing from you guys, and this gives Hallie a great sense of who's on the line, where everyone's coming from, so thank you.
I know, and I'm doing them back to back, everyone. I know it's a lot of pressure.
This is it, yeah. All righty, I'm going to go ahead and close it, and let's take a look at our results. So 39% of you said you feel like an imposter 25% of the time, 45% of you said 50% of the time, and then a smaller percentage, 15%, said 75% of the time. So mostly in that 25 to 50% of the time.
Yep. Okay, perfect. So that's the good news, right? Thank you, Sarah, for that. That's perfect. The good news is that it's, 50% or less. I would say, just by the way, because I was thinking about this for myself, I would say it's probably about 40% of the time. And it depends for me on, how my business is going that year and what's going on for me as well, so it can be situational. But please know that for me, even, it can be sometimes half the time. And what happens to us so often, which is why I want you all to become more aware of it, in the first place, and that's a really important first step, is it just kind of flies by and we start to become numb to it almost and not even notice this is going on. And so the more we can become aware of it, and some of you may even want to say, okay, for 48 hours, I'll have clients do this sometimes, for 48 hours, give or take, they'll write down every time they hear something like this in their head or feel this way, so that you can get a really clear sense of how much time you're actually wasting thinking about this stuff instead of thinking positively about, what you need to be doing next, or that you're being successful or being productive or whatever it is. There's a lot of time that we waste on these, negative thoughts, okay? 9 times out of 10, our clients, when we first work with a client, we ask them, what is your biggest obstacle to achieving your career goals? And this is one of the impacts that they tell us, that 9 times out of 10, they will say that I am the thing, if you will, that's getting in my own way. I get in my own way the most, often. It's not some external thing like you might think, like, oh, I'm not qualified, or I can't afford to make a change or take a risk or whatever it is. Normally, people say they are getting in their own way, okay? So again, you're not alone, and this is where that awareness at the very beginning is just so incredibly critical, okay? All right, so the next thing I'd like you to take a look at and think about, please, is these are the results or the impact. Like I talked about a few minutes ago, there's the internal impact, and we covered that already. Then there's the external impact. So this is how the imposter syndrome, and I'm sorry, I just think this is so funny with these glasses and all that, I had to choose that image, but this is where the imposter syndrome actually impacts us tangibly in our professional lives and in our work lives, and where the big problem comes in, okay? So I want you all to take a look at this slide for me, please. And I want you all to write down right now, just for yourself, what is the biggest negative impact for you? And write down 2 of those things. What are the things that happen as a result of you having the imposter syndrome, these fears, etc., okay? So some examples here are on this slide. It could be that you don't apply for a different job that you'd like to have, or a promotion. When I did a presentation to biology graduates several years ago, they said, one of the things for them was they wouldn't submit papers, or they were unwilling to do a presentation at an association meeting, or submit articles, or whatever it was for their research. They weren't willing to do it because they felt like, gosh, I don't have anything good to say, or I'm not smart enough. Another one could be that you're understating your experience or skill set. And another one that's very, very interesting, and I think is really important to point out, is at the bottom here on the right, is that sometimes when we are, consumed by this imposter syndrome, we will over-prepare for tasks. Our perfectionism can really get in the way of us being productive, because we'll work too hard or spend too much time on one task that we don't really need to. And all of these result in higher stress. So this is part of the external impact that can happen. I want you all, like I said, to just write down whether the impact for you is one of these items or something else. And please feel free to share these in the chat box with us, so that we can get some additional ideas from people as well. And one of the things I would suggest you take on in the next week too is to, as part of your journaling exercise, like I mentioned, and that awareness step is to write down, okay, what are the things I'm not doing? Where am I hiding out in my career and in my life and playing it safe too much because of this imposter syndrome? For me, just by the way, the impact on me is sometimes, if I'm not feeling like my best self, I'll avoid some tasks at work that I need to tackle. And when I'm taking action, whether it's networking or conducting a sales call or something else, I can just tell I'm not handling it as well as I could. And I'm more, just overall in my career, I'm more reactive rather than proactive. And that's never good. We always want our clients to be proactive about their career. Okay, so think about what the external impacts are and where you're quote unquote kind of hiding out in your career, not taking a risk, whatever it is, in order to move forward. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at the next slide here and start to talk about some tools to effectively manage the imposter syndrome, okay? So the first step, as we discussed, is identify if you have it, okay? And we did those polls about that, and how often, what the frequency is, and when this normally happens. And just by the way, please know that this can sometimes come up in our personal lives as well. Sometimes if we're talking to someone, a family member, or someone we respect or whatever it is, sometimes they can, unfortunately, unwittingly, bring out these negative thoughts. And so if there are people in your life that you realize are kind of those negative Nellies, or even if they're not that way, but kind of inadvertently bring out these fears in you, you want to think about how to manage the conversation with them a little bit differently, so that you can steer away from those topics that might bring up the imposter syndrome for you, okay? Some of the things, and I'll throw these out to you right now to give you some ideas, some of the things that you can start to do in terms of, starting to manage the imposter syndrome. Like we said before, number one would be journaling for a day regarding those negative thoughts going on. So 24 or 48 hours writing those down. The second thing is identify and manage that negative thinking, okay? And start to talk back to it a little bit. So in coaching, we use a tool called gremlin taming. And there actually is a book, everyone, I wanted to mention called Taming Your Gremlin that is a very short, easy read that is so helpful for managing these inner fears or negative thinking, okay? It's called Taming Your Gremlin. And if anybody has any questions about it later, feel free to ask. But some of the different ways that you can start to manage this negative thinking is to just literally push it aside. Tell it, I'm going to talk to you later. Set an appointment at the end of the day to talk to it later. And of course, you'll forget and it'll just kind of go away. Talk back to it and remind yourself of the things that you did that day that were productive and positive, or the things you've done in the past, okay? So identifying and managing that negative thinking and either pushing it aside or talking back to it can be very, very helpful, okay? And on the flip side of this, another thing that you can do after you've journaled about the negative thoughts that you've had so far, you can write down and do a daily accomplishments journal at the end of the day. We feel this is very powerful for clients. You don't have to write down 10 things, even if it's just a few steps or accomplishments there, that's really good. But that will help you at the end of each day, instead of focusing on what didn't happen or why you weren't as successful as you wanted to be, what you accomplished and achieved that day. So have that kind of brag book or accomplishments document, okay? We also suggest, just by the way, as part of being able to take a step and take a risk later on, whether it's a new job or, going for a promotion, we suggest to our clients that they have an accomplishments document that they actually update once a month. And this not just helps them with their, positive thinking and focusing on their success, but it's also helpful to have that to add to your resume later on, or to that document that you need to submit when you're going for the promotion. Sometimes we forget these things, a client testimonial, something that our boss said to us, something that a peer said to us or emailed to us. Having a kind of brag book at your disposal, like on your desktop of your computer, where you keep all of these accomplishments and successes, does wonders for not just your confidence, and sense of, why you deserve the promotion or that next step, whatever the career move is, but it's also that tangible evidence of how you can move forward, okay? So those are some ideas. I wanted to share with you some of the ideas and tools that we used with the client Beth that I mentioned earlier, and then I'll tell you what her result was as well. So client Beth, in order to help improve her confidence and manage around the imposter syndrome for her, one of the things we had her do was interview others. So the first thing on the slide here is we asked her to interview other people about what she did well and what they thought she did better than most people they knew. Talk about her strengths, talk about the adjectives, that they thought of when they were asked to describe her, okay? And this was a huge boost for her, but also reminded her of those skills that she had that she kind of took for granted. This happens to us a lot, where we discount the things that come naturally to us, and we just assume, oh, everyone's good at that. It's not actually a skill that I would use to promote myself. Absolutely not. So interviewing others helps you pull out what their strengths and skills are. And if nothing else, everyone, it's validating to remind you that these are actually things that not everyone is good at. So she interviewed others to feel more confident in their strengths and skills, to uncover those things that she took for granted, but validate those things she, knew she did well deep down, but these fears kind of covered up all the time. One of the second things she did too is she wrote down an affirmation that she kept on her bathroom mirror for a month. Here's the deal with affirmations. I'm sure you all have heard of these before. You have to buy into them and believe them. Too often what people will do is they'll write an affirmation that, is empty, that they don't really believe, and it's just like they're pretending like they can buy into it. That doesn't work. You need to acknowledge reality in your affirmation. So it's okay to say, I'm not quite qualified for this particular position yet, but I'm working towards it and I'm getting there. That is an affirmation in and of itself because it ends on a positive note, but it still applies or includes reality, okay? So she wrote down an affirmation that made sense for her, that addressed directly one of her biggest gremlins, where she was attributing her success to her previous bosses who, quote unquote, liked her and gave her a lucky break, okay? The third thing that she did is she wrote down all of her accomplishments since childhood. And this sounds like it's kind of a funny exercise in a way, or it sounds kind of funny. It is so effective with clients, because when you think back to, when even you were in grade school and everything you've accomplished so far, it really does give you, number one, a greater sense of confidence. But number two, the other thing that's interesting about this exercise, everybody, is that you start to identify themes in what you've accomplished. And that tells you, things that you're interested in and passionate about, yes, but also gives you a greater sense of what strengths you have that you may have forgotten about. Number 4, and this one is very important too, is to take small risks every day. So here's the deal, everyone. Confidence is a muscle that needs to be worked out, just like you would go, work out at the gym. It's not something, at least in my opinion, that people either have or they don't. Sure, some people are more confident than others, of course, but it's not something that just goes away completely and disappears, I don't think. It typically is buried under there somewhere, but it's something that you have to kind of use on a regular basis. So what we tell our clients is you need to take small risks and push yourself outside of your comfort zone in some way, shape, or form on a consistent basis in order for that confidence to stay put and continue to grow. These risks don't have to be huge. If someone is more introverted, for example, actually I'm more introverted than extroverted, I might say to a client, talk to the cashier at the grocery store a little bit longer than you normally would, or do it, at all if you normally don't. It can be small risks. Speak up a little bit more in a meeting. Come in prepared or more prepared than you usually do, and be committed to asking 2 questions, providing, feedback on 2 particular things that you feel need to be fixed. Taking these small risks every single day or on a more regular basis helps build your confidence muscle. And if you feel like you're stagnant at all and just kind of stuck in this fear, this one will help you enormously because it's tangible action that will move you forward. And the last one here, number 5 on the slide, is to notice your physical posture, your body position, if you will, or your posture, and how you normally sit or stand at work during the course of meetings, etc. there's this great TED Talk on body language. The link is here on the slide. And it's fantastic talking about how your body language shapes who you are and how you feel about yourself. And this sounds silly, but it's incredibly valid. When we work with clients, and I'm working with a client and specifically talking about confidence, one of the things I'll do is say, get into a confident posture for me right then and there, okay? And when they do that, and I ask them, do you feel at least a smidge more confident? You know, at least just a little bit more confident after doing that? They will always say, I do. Some people will say more than others, of course, yes, but they will always say they felt more confident or they feel that way. I didn't do anything. I didn't wave a magic wand, and they didn't either. But our body language and our posture can make a huge difference in how we feel about ourselves, and therefore if we speak up or not. So check out this TED Talk. It's very good. And what I have found through coaching is that physical movement and action taken along with the internal work that we're trying to do in order to, up our game and be better at work, that, the two coupled together, I should say, is very impactful and helps enormously, because with the physical action that you're taking, you're solidifying it more like in your psyche and your subconscious mind and in your body, okay? So pay attention over the next week or two to, the tone and the volume of your voice, as well as your posture and whether you lean forward or back, whether you tend to look people in the eye when you're talking with them, or do you tend to look down or away because you're nervous. Really pay attention to your body language and what's going on for you, and work towards more confident body language in different ways. The other thing that you can do with this one is also to pay attention to and notice. Pick somebody at your office or at your organization that you really admire, that comes across as a great leader or who's very confident, and emulate some of those things. Notice what their body language is, some of the things that they do or say, and start to emulate those a little bit and decide which ones you might want to adopt, okay? So client Beth, let's go back to that, and then we'll start to talk about action items here, and then we'll start to get to the Q&A in just a few minutes. But client Beth, so she was at her job at Home Depot, and after we worked through all of this, this imposter syndrome for her, in the next session, she called me and said, guess what? She had gotten a huge promotion, actually to work at Sears in Chicago. And it was such a big deal. It was such a move up for her professionally and in her career that her whole family, she was moving her whole family to go be there for that job and move up there for that. So for her, it was so much of getting out of her own way that made the huge difference, okay? So I just want to remind you all, this stuff works. It's very effective. Okay, so one of the last things I want to have you start to do, everyone, is start to identify what action steps you will take in the next few weeks here, okay? You can brainstorm action steps with other people, friends, family members after you interview them to find out more about what you need to work on. They could give you some great ideas about possible action steps that you need to take as well. But we want to think about number 2 on this slide here, 2 action steps that you will take in the next week. Is it, I'm going to interview other people? Is it, I'm going to do the journaling exercise to learn more about, where this happens for me more frequently than not? Is it that I'm going to speak up more in meetings and kind of notice the tone and volume of my voice and my body posture? Whatever it is, I want you to write these down. And actually, please feel free to share these in the chat box as well, because that helps us with accountability. And your ideas could give other people ideas about action steps they should take as well. One of the things that I would encourage you all to do too, and then we'll get to Q&A here in just a second, is to ask for and gather feedback from people at your current workplace, people that you trust and feel would give you positive, constructive feedback. You don't want to go to those negative Nellies, so to speak, and you want to make sure that your brand and you still come across as confident. But ask people how you come across at work, and if there's anything that you have not noticed maybe that makes you feel or seem more confident to other people as well, kind of what that perception is. I would encourage you to do that, and even with your boss, if you feel that conversation would be helpful and useful and not detrimental to you in any way, okay? So write down your 2 action steps. And really quickly, I just wanted to share with you, if anyone would like to know more about our coaching services, I'd be happy to chat with you about them. These are some of the places our clients have secured positions and some of the testimonials from working with us through career coaching. And like I said, I'm happy to do a free career strategy session with anyone that feels like they need help with this topic from today or anything else in terms of your career goals, okay? So as we're starting to formulate our questions, go ahead and start putting those in the chat box, everyone. I'm happy to answer as many as come through. I want you to think about, too, is what will be different tomorrow as a result of today, and what you've learned today about yourself and what's going on for you and what can be different. One of my favorite quotes that I typically use in these webinars is, "The greatest risk in life is not taking one." I want you all to think about when you're 80, let's say, whatever age, but down the line, do you want to look back on your personal life and your professional life and say, gosh, I didn't take that risk? Or would you rather say, I took that risk, even if I failed, I at least tried? You know what the answer is for me. I want to say that I at least tried. So think about that question as you finish your lunch today and as you ask questions and what you need to do differently. Okay, good, Sarah. Let's get to the Q&A, and we'll give them a few minutes because I know sometimes it takes a minute to kind of formulate what questions or comments you might have. Feel free to share those too.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Hallie, for talking all this through. Hallie, I know too you had sent me a worksheet. Should I share that with everyone here or just send that out in the follow-up email? What's best to do there?
Oh, do you mean the handout or?
Yes.
Oh, the handout would be great. So just FYI, everyone, thanks for saying that, Sarah, because I had forgotten it.
Yeah,
the handout there, and I think emailing it afterwards would be great too.
Absolutely. So yeah, everyone, you'll receive a handout from Hallie. I'll include that in the webinar follow-up email. So just use that as a little worksheet as you're thinking through what we discussed here today. So
Yeah.
Hallie, questions for you that have come in. So let's see where to start. How do you get yourself to start believing affirmations or positive feedback that you're getting externally?
Great question. So there's a little bit of 2 things I would say here is there's a little bit of fake it till you make it. So I do believe, as I said earlier, that you have to at least buy into the affirmation a little bit, you know, like deep, deep down. But there was a time in my career when I was a lot younger and I had a job that I felt I was in way over my head. And for whatever reason, my boss believed in me, so I was just kind of going with it at the time. And I did write down a couple of affirmations and saying them over and over on a more regular basis, as well as writing down the evidence of, you know, that success or the skills that I had. So that journal at the end of each day is one of the things I would recommend too. So kind of the internal side of it, where once you start to say it over and over to yourself, your mind does shift and change in that direction. And so there is a little bit of, you know, fake it till you make it, like I said. But then another way to help you believe more in yourself and kind of, you know, step into that more is writing it down, because there's definitely something between the head and the hand where it becomes more solidified kind of in your psyche, if you will. So I would write down on a regular basis and look at those things on a regular basis, the things that people have said about you and about your strengths. And those 2 steps should help you move in the right direction.
Awesome, thank you. Another question, is it better to act confidently without having full knowledge or experience or expertise for the situation that you're in, or to be honest about what you truly lack, even if this seems less confident? How do you balance those 2 sides?
Great question. I love that. So I tend to suggest and err on the side of confidence. However, I don't talk about something that I'm not prepared for or I'm not knowledgeable about. So for example, if there's something in a presentation that could be discussed, but that's not my area of expertise, or I haven't read enough about it, or whatever it is, I'm not going to mention that part of it. And then if someone asks me a question about it, I'm honest about it. So the short answer would be err on the side of confidence and stand in the areas or the places that you do feel confident and good about. And if you need to beef up your expertise a little bit, don't hesitate to take a class or, read some articles about it to feel a little bit more confident. But then if you're on the spot or someone asks you a question, you've got to be honest about it, and you can even say something like, this is not my area of expertise per se, but my opinion is this. You can always kind of couch it that way, and that can help as well. Hopefully that answers. If it doesn't, feel free to ask a little bit more.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. What are some affirmations? You spoke about affirmations that you really found to work for you, but do you have suggestions as to affirmations that actually work? Are there kind of these general affirmations that folks can use? Does it really have to be specific to the role that you're in? Talk to us a little bit more about those.
Sure. So a couple of kind of criteria for affirmations, they need to be short and sweet. If they're too long, they're going to kind of lose their power. And also, one of the second things is, or the second thing, I guess I should say, is you want to have some emotion around it and feel good when you say it, especially when you say it out loud. So by the way, one of the things that I did a long time ago it is still when I do it today, but a long time ago, I actually did it specifically for passing my coach certification. And it was something that when I said it out loud to myself in the mirror, it made me smile just automatically. So one of the things you can do is say it out loud in the mirror. And there are studies that have shown that when you're doing that and you're looking at yourself in the eye, it does have a greater impact. And what I chose is something short and sweet. I said, I want to pass the exam with flying colors. Because when I thought about how I wanted to feel after I was finished with the exam, it was like that. It was easy. That kind of image or metaphor just kind of came to me. So think about, it doesn't have to be industry specific or role specific unless you really want it to be. I think that more general in terms of, I'm a talented writer with so much to offer my audience, or something like that makes you feel good and that is generic enough that you feel you can step into it and it's not so specific that you're like, gosh, I'm not quite there yet. I think having it be a little bit generic like that is good. But remember, you want it to be short and sweet. You want it to start with I am. So the affirmation is more powerful that when you're saying I am this, and then say whatever it is about, who you want to be in your career. Hopefully that answers too.
Super, thank you. A question about kind of two different areas of professional or personal fulfillment in life. So this question asker says, I don't have imposter syndrome in my volunteer life where I feel good, competent, etc. But I totally feel imposter syndrome where I work for pay. Yes, I'm probably in the wrong job, but it's hard to replicate my benefits and salary in the fields where I volunteer so successfully. Any advice for translating that confidence, competency, from volunteer to working life, or any advice for how to balance out the two a little bit?
Sure, that's a great question. So when you're trying to kind of bridge that gap, I would start to look at, okay, what are the strengths and skills and talents, if you will, that you use in your volunteer life, and write them down and, kind of column A on a page. And then do another separate column B, for the work that you do now. And how do those skills and strengths that you use in your volunteer work, are there any, even if it's just one or two, that translate over, that you actually use them at work maybe, but because you're using them, let's say, for the wrong reason, or not a cause that you believe in, for example, they just don't have as much meaning for you. So I'm wondering about that, if there are things that you do that are similar, but because it's in a completely different environment, that's part of why you don't feel as good about it. So try to see if there's any, quote unquote, transferable skills and strengths across the two or between the two. And that can then make you feel a little bit more confident about your work life as well. Check that out first. And then I would also interview people in your volunteer position and a couple of people at your workplace too, and see how they perceive you, and see if you can find those similarities there as well. Good question.
Along those lines, in terms of checking in with people you may work with, trying to get a clearer sense of how you're perceived, how do you go about or overcome the perceptions that you think people have about you when you know they aren't accurate? For example, people think that you're cold or that you only care about the group or the final outcome or the projects, or that you aren't incredibly outgoing and friendly. How do you go about kind of overcoming those to feel more like your true self in the workplace?
These are great questions, Sarah. I have to tell you, I think these are some of the most thoughtful ones I've ever had on a webinar. Kudos to you guys. This is
That's
awesome.
Georgetown
So
alums for you. Good job, guys.
I know, yay, gold star. So what I would say is, so first of all, you do need to, it depends on the person who's giving you that feedback, right? So first of all, if they just tend to be a negative person and you kind of know that, what they're saying is inaccurate and you're like, I really don't think that's true. One of the things I would do is I would ask a few other people to find out if they're right or not. But take into consideration, I guess I should say, the messenger, right? To see how much you need to kind of filter out what's true and what's not true. However, at the same time, I would be sure that you at least gave it some time to think about how you might be coming across, because sometimes we're very self-aware and sometimes we have major blind spots and we don't know how we're coming across. So I would consider as well what they've said and start to observe your own behavior and notice what's going on, and ask a few other colleagues as well what they think and if there are specific things that they've noticed. For example, I've had clients tell me that a coworker said to them, you roll your eyes all the time, and they had no idea they did that. So there are plenty of times, everyone, that we do something that we're just so used to doing it that we don't even know it. Okay. If the person is off base and inaccurate, I would work towards, like understanding where they're coming from and why they might be saying that, kind of, and have empathy for whatever's going on with them, and then just try to filter out what they're saying. Have like an imaginary kind of, field between the two of you, so that if they do give you that feedback, ask other people. And if they say no, you can push it aside. But if you're being inauthentic at work and if you are coming across in a way that doesn't feel like you, I would make a list of the things that you are doing now that don't feel truly authentic. Are you not speaking up enough? Are you not yourself in terms of being as outgoing as you normally are in your personal life? And take small action steps towards doing that. Can be simple as, tomorrow when I come into work, I'm going to try to say hi to someone that I don't normally say hi to, and just push myself outside my comfort zone. So small action steps to become more yourself in specific areas that you've identified and written down, that can help enormously as well. Great question.
Great, thank you. Here's another one. This writer says that they feel like their education has made them less confident, and sometimes I wish I'd just gone to quote normal schools or pursued a quote normal degree. Does this ever come up with your clients, and how would you suggest addressing someone maybe who has a bit of a different background or who's gone to a not so conventional school in the past?
I would take stock of what that school did provide you with, because it sounds like you're kind of stuck in, okay, what's negative about it? We can't do anything to change it, right? It's the past. I would take a few minutes to take stock of what it did give you and what the benefits actually were. If it was less conventional, does that make you more of an outside the box thinker or have a different perspective on things and on projects, et cetera, than other people would? So try to come up with and pull out what was positive about that experience, even if it's only a couple of things and the majority of it was negative. Think of the positive parts of it for you and focus on those. And when you promote yourself and talk about, what this degree was or whatever, you can talk about it for a couple minutes. These are the things it gave me, or just even less than a minute, but then focus instead on where you want to go. So instead of saying stuck in, okay, this is where I've been and it's not helping me, spend a moment on, okay, how has it benefited me? What are the good things? And then I'm going to start focusing on what I want to do next, so that you're not so mired in the past as much. I know some of these answers are a little bit generic because it's hard sometimes to give one size fits all, responses, but hopefully that helped too.
No, this is great. Do you have tips on asking your supervisor fewer questions regarding tasks or assignments and trusting your own judgment more? How do you balance between those two things?
Great question. So you want to think of, okay, so basically when you're about to ask a question or you're thinking about something, I would write it down on a piece of paper and think, like, kind of start to have a checklist of, okay, is this something I can figure out on my own or by asking a coworker instead or doing a little bit of research? And with the majority of your questions, if not all of them, I personally, for a while, for like 3 weeks, give or take, I would try to find the answer on my own first, just to kind of develop that muscle of going in the opposite extreme a little bit, and then you can kind of go back to the middle. But instead of asking the questions all the time, try to find your own answer by researching online, by asking someone else, or coming up with, okay, this is what I think the right answer is and what I would do. And if you do still need to go speak with your boss, you can say, instead of just throwing out the question, saying, I had this question, I think this is the answer, but I wanted to check in with you just to be sure. So you can start to be providing your own answers to help you boost your confidence. And when, gosh, you're right the majority of the time, that will boost your confidence as well and make you feel better. So that's something small you can start to do.
Sure, that's great. And Hallie, do you feel that gender is a factor at all in this syndrome? Do you see it affecting both men and women equally? Do you see one gender, being affected by it more? What does that breakdown look like?
So, such a great question. I almost referenced that earlier. I honestly see it in both genders. And when we host these webinars, it's usually about 50-50 male, female, honestly. I know that we might make the assumption, and in some cases, it might be a little bit stronger and harder to overcome for women. But I'll tell you, like I said, it's usually 50-50. It really depends on the person and their career path and where they are in their career right now and what their history has been. Because just as many, in some cases, men have had, a difficult time climbing the ladder or whatever it is, or a difficult time in their professional career that impacted their confidence. So to me, it's more of a person by person basis.
Great, thank you. Last question for you. Any insight, and I love this question, I feel like it's such a broad, general question, but any insight psychologically, why do we do this to ourselves? Why do we suffer from imposter syndrome? Why is this such a big hump for all of us to get over? Why does this happen?
Um, Hard to say exactly. Here would be my, from coaching and from using tools like the StrengthsFinder assessment with clients and understanding the research from the Gallup organization, et cetera, is our society, and a lot of societies all over the world actually, so not just American society, we tend to focus on what do we need to fix all the time. It's like, okay, what do I need to do to fix this weakness or challenge or whatever it is? So I think some of it is just human nature, and maybe some of it comes from childhood. We could say that too, perhaps. But I think a lot of our society, and unfortunately, in our professional lives, in our performance reviews, for example, a lot of times we're focused on, okay, what needs to change and get better? Even as a coach, I find sometimes too, that I don't take as much time with clients to celebrate what they've succeeded in or what they've done well. And it's a constant like, okay, well, what do we need to fix or change? Instead of, hey, look at all this over here. That's fantastic. So I think it's a little bit of our society and just our, workplace organizations too, that we're always focused on that. And what the StrengthsFinder and Gallup organizations say is we need to shift that towards more focusing on what our strengths are and what we do well. And if we spent more time doing that, then we would be more effective and successful. But we're just kind of used to looking at the negative. So that's my best assessment.
No, that's great. Thank you for sharing that insight, and especially given all the experience that you have in terms of coaching over time. That's great to hear. Hallie,
Sure.
we'll leave it there for today. I encourage all of you, please follow up with Hallie personally after the conclusion of the webinar to continue today's conversations. These were fantastic questions that you all sent in, and I'm sure there are more questions out there, so please, please, please get in touch with Hallie. Hallie, thank you so much for taking the time to share all of this with us. We're thrilled to have you be here.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.